Hello and welcome to the World Leader Leaderboard end of year special. I'm Jack and I'm joined this week by Rory.
Hello.
And Zach.
Hello.
How are you both doing?
Excited. I'm excited for a bit of difference.
Yeah,
I'm
absolutely.
excited for this episode.
If you're a regular World Leader Leaderboard viewer, you'll already know what's happening, but if this is all new to you, let me explain. Throughout the year, every single week, we've ranked world leaders to tell you who the best and worst performing leaders are. And based on that analysis, week by week, we've adjusted the leaderboard, which currently looks like this. Now, the normal caveat that we always apply at this point is these aren't endorsements. These aren't who we like most and dislike most. This is purely how well we think they're doing based on their own personal objectives. Anyway, throughout the year, this leaderboard has been changing dramatically, but right now, this is how things stand. In today's episode, we're going to discuss the 7 biggest leaders on the board. That's the 7 people who we've moved and talked about most in episodes. That's Donald Trump, Keir Starmer, Volodymyr Zelenskyy, Emmanuel Macron, Ursula von der Leyen, Vladimir Putin, and Benjamin Netanyahu. We're going to discuss how their year has been, whether they've been winning or losing this year. And then we're going to give them an ultimate verdict as whether this year has been a winning year or a losing year for them. There's also going to be some extra fun sprinkled in because it's an end of year special, but that's broadly what's about to happen. Are we ready to go?
Yeah, I think so.
Amazing. Let's start with Donald Trump. Donald Trump currently sits in the middle of our board, but throughout the year, he's moved quite a lot. Let's have a look at his movement throughout the year. Donald Trump started the year pretty strong. He entered the board at the top part, then cratered in the middle of the year and has bounced back since. Although, as I say, he is in the middle of the board. He moved up for 9 weeks and down 12 times. So an interesting balance. But let's discuss Trump's year. As we can see, a little bit tumultuous. But do you think this year was a good year or a bad year for Trump?
It's quite a neat one because it was late January that he was inaugurated, so we can sort of look at this full year.
Yeah.
I mean, a good year in the sense that he became the president again. But I think as we look back, I think the trajectory has been downwards sort of since the start. We sort of started the year thinking like, this is this new Trump era. He is totally dominant, not only over his party, but over US politics, and then in the early days of his presidency, sort of over the world with the sort of things he was doing. But you look at the position he's in now, and he really just looks incredibly weak and vulnerable. I think part of it is because he is a lame duck now.
Yeah.
He's had several scandals that have sort of weakened him, both sort of politically speaking. So in Congress, you look at the Republican Party, they're now starting to stand up a bit more to him. Over things like Jeffrey Epstein, and I mean, to a certain extent, certain tariff things as well, but not to a huge extent. I mean, the main thing we can look at, which is the most obvious one, is his approval rating, which has really sunk heavily since the start. And he just doesn't look as politically sort of untouchable or invincible as he once did. And that sort of, the vote last year that looked like this massive realignment just looks like a sort of normal anti-incumbent election that he maybe read wrong and sort of took the wrong lesson from it. And he's now dealing with an electorate that Joe Biden was dealing with, one that doesn't like it when the economy isn't doing well and when prices are too high, and he doesn't seem to be able to deal with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Zach, what do you make of this?
Yeah, I think Rory's right. I think that the dynamics within the Republican Party are interesting, right? I think for the first couple of months, actually really quite a long time, there was a sort of taboo within the sort of congressional party that you just basically don't disobey Trump. And I think as that taboo breaks down, his life will become a lot more difficult, especially if you don't get a great result at the midterms. The economic thing, I think it's hard to evaluate Trump's economy so far, right? I mean, obviously in lots of ways it's not doing brilliantly, but it is worth saying that it has outperform the most pessimistic forecasts, right? You know, I mean, you go back to pre-January, you got people saying that he's going to bring down the entire economy. A crash is imminent. Yeah, we might look very silly if plausibly a crash might have happened by the time this is out.
Sure,
but saying that tariffs were going to lead to this massive inflationary spike, maybe even a sort of stagflation. And I think that it's done better than that, right? It's avoided the worst case scenarios. But growth is relatively slow Inflation is still sticky, although we're recording this on whatever it is, the
18th.
And this morning, the latest inflation data for the US came out saying that it had fallen to 2.7%, which is not miles above the Fed's target. So I think that the economy is I think the best way of summing it up is that actually the economy has done better than we all thought it would, especially after Liberation Day. But actually, outside of that Overton window, it's doing pretty badly, really, right? Like growth is slower than it used to be. Still a very, very big budget deficit, and inflation is still above target.
Yeah.
And obviously, there's that whole thing. Quite a lot of that growth is functionally down to AI-related spending, which I don't think people really love. I think we'd be remiss not to mention the foreign policy stuff, right? Again, I think, in a similar way to the economy, really, it's been not as good as he said it would be, right? But actually, I think he has had some achievements. Most obviously, I think the Gaza peace deal. But obviously, during the campaign, he said it's going to end all the wars, and that's going to be that. And you got the FIFA Peace Trophy though. Yeah, crazy. We shouldn't forget that.
No, it's a big deal.
But and I think he deserves a bit of credit for the Gaza peace deal. And I think that again, we're recording this in amongst Ukraine negotiations, and it's possible that he'll squeeze a deal out of Ukraine. But I don't think it's been the sort of peacemaking triumph that he originally sold it as.
What do we make of his recent rebound on the board? As you say, Rory, his polling is continuing to slip and he continues to have issues, but at least on our board, he has moved up as kind of autumn and winter have set in. What do you think that's reflective of? Do we remember what that's reflective of?
I'm trying to remember what caused that, like 3 or 4 spikes in a row from the bottom. When would that have been? That was what, 1, 2, 3.
It might have been a Gaza peace deal sort of thing.
Yeah,
probably.
Was.
Yeah. I guess it would be that. But he does have these moments of sort of achieving something that we have bumped him up for. And it is interesting that he has landed right back in the middle at the end of the year. I'm
always torn between how much like credit to give him for those achievements, though, right? Like I feel like there's a sense in which gravity is just pulling those big conflicts, right? Israel, Gaza, and Ukraine, Russia. There is a sort of gravity towards peace at the moment, right? You know what I mean? Like I think that it's not just that Trump is pushing for peace; it's that especially in Israel and Gaza, the entire international community was really at its wit's end with Israel, and there was a lot of international pressure. And I think something similar is true in Russia and Ukraine. It's not so much international pressure, but more that the front lines are. I mean, Russia's still making some advances, but the front lines have sort of stabilized, at least relative to the sort of speed of movement in 2023 and 2022. And I think that just lends itself towards peace negotiations.
Absolutely. Okay, so that's Trump. As you mentioned, started and ended the year in the same spot on our board, which is better than can be said for some of the people we're going to be talking about. One last question, a fun one. We've run the numbers. Which one of you from the panel do you think has moved Trump the most? I'm going to ask this question for everyone. And I will say it is redistributed based on how often you appeared on the podcast. So someone like Zach has appeared on almost every episode. Rory, you've been on a lot too. It is balanced based on the number of appearances you've had.
Oh, so who's moved them the most? Not just out of us two, but out of anyone?
Out of everyone. Okay. Yes. One of you has moved them the most. One of you has moved them the least.
Really?
That's a clue.
Oh, it's got to be Zach, right?
I got moved them the most. Yeah.
Shall we reveal? It was Zach.
Yes.
Zach moved him 18.67% of your moves were Trump, which is quite a lot. Rory only 3.85. You only moved him twice this year.
I feel like it'd be so off-brand.
Yeah.
You love a niche.
Yeah.
That's why you should watch this.
Okay. Next up, let's take a look at how Keir Starmer's year has been. Started the year pretty strong. I mean, a bit of a dip at the very beginning, but moved up to the top part of the board for much of spring, and then as summer set in, really crashed out and has basically stayed flat at the bottom of the board for pretty much the entire year. Zach, what do you make of Starmer's year? Winner or loser, would you say?
Massive loser. I mean, I think it's hard to, I've been thinking about this quite a lot. I think we talked about this on a couple of other podcasts, but it's just hard to overstate how unpopular he is. I mean, it's incredible. His numbers are sort of Liz Truss levels. And I do think at first glance, it feels a little unfair because, I mean, he isn't as bad as Liz Truss. I think that's fair to say. But I do just think there's there's this sort of sense of cumulative exhaustion in the British public, in that, you know, we had however many prime ministers balls everything up, and then we had this one say, "Don't worry, guys, I'm here to provide some stability, fix things," and that hasn't happened. I think we're all just sort of piling our just despair onto him, unfortunately. But some of it is merited. He has been, I think it's probably fair to say, pretty rubbish.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure what that spike is for. You know what I mean? He's doing pretty well at the start of the year. Some of it's probably Trump related. I mean,
I think it was a lot of like, trade deal
diplomacy,
and just doing well with Trump. Felt like he had a lot of international influence, and I guess we gave him credit for that. Certainly, at the beginning of his tenure, that was something even the media gave him credit for, I would say. But yeah, that is definitely tailed off. In fact, our rules dictate that you can't drop below kind of -3. That's the bottom tier of the board. So even though he kept moving down in the end of the year, he is basically flatlined. In reality, though, if we did allow him to keep moving down further, he would currently be on -10, which is crazy. I mean, makes sense. He's had 13 losing weeks and 6 winning weeks. So that does kind of check. Rory, I'm assuming you agree.
Yeah, I do. Yeah. Can't really, there's not much to say to counteract that. I think that period where he was sort of higher up on the board, you had the international stuff, but also I think, you know, earlier in the year when, I mean, the polling still wasn't good and it was dramatic, like reforms overtaken. Yeah. But it still felt at that point like, is this just a moment? And now we're at the end of the year and the polling just has not got better for Labour.
There was a real sense at the beginning of the year of people saying something along the lines of like, we're less than a year in. It's ages to the next election. He can turn it around. Like there was a confidence in like the broad ability of like, don't reform are ahead, but no one's actually going to vote for them. This is ages away. And like that might still be true of reform, I guess. Maybe when it comes to the ballot box in 2029, they won't. But it feels pretty laughable at this stage, the idea that Starmer has the capability to forge a massive turnaround in 4 years or 40 years. Like,
I think some of that is just structural, right? I think you get to a point of unpopularity where actually there's no way back because everything you touch turns to. Can I swear?
Yeah, sure.
I was going to say, but everything turns to. I don't know if it's a main channel, you know. But so I think there's now at the point where even if he tries to implement a popular policy, everyone sort of cynically goes, "Oh, he's doing this for political reasons or whatever." Yeah. But also, I think he just hasn't learned. You know what I mean? Like he's making the same mistakes, especially when it just comes to U-turns, right? I mean, we still do have endless, barely disguised U-turns, and that was a problem at the start of his premiership that you thought maybe was just teething problems, right? But you know, the budget I think betrayed the fact that is a structural issue in the sort of higher ups of the Labour Party, and I think it's fundamentally just because they don't have a sort of actual ideological project that they want to pursue, right? Which just leaves them relatively rudderless and thus prone to sort of like poll-induced policy shifts.
Do we think in a year's time that he will be in exactly the same spot at the bottom of the board, still failing? Do we think he'll be further up on the board, or do we think he will not be on the board at all because he won't be Prime Minister anymore?
I think
cast your votes.
I think there's a pretty strong chance that he won't be on the board.
Yeah,
I know there's a lot of leadership chatter, and often it's like just chatter and nothing happens. But I do think the May elections will be the moment.
They could be bad.
And you can see the sort of manoeuvring going on.
Is that your prediction then? If you had to pick one of three
for the end of next year?
End of next year.
Yeah, I think he'll be gone. And if he is still around, he's still going to be at the bottom. I don't think he's going to be at the top.
I'm genuinely really looking forward to it. I don't think I look forward to much in politics, but I'm genuinely looking forward to like the Andy Burnham iceberg. Do you know what I mean? That it's such a convoluted way for him to get into the leadership collective. But he's still going to do it. And it's just going to be, everyone's going to see it coming from a mile off. And he's just going to have to insist, no, I'm not going for the leadership, as he sort of like tries to steal into a safe seat, convince an MP to step down. And then, I mean, I think if that were to happen, that'd be very fun.
Yeah.
So you're also predicting no Starmer on board?
Yeah, I think so. I don't think Andy Burnham's the most likely replacement, but I do think he will be gone by the end of the year.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so it doesn't sound like he's got much longer left on the board.
Yeah.
But who do you think moved him most on the board this year? I'm not going to give you any clues for this one.
Are we allowed to bet on this?
No, because I'd have to take the other side of that bet.
Yeah, it's got to be Ben.
It's going to be Ben. I want to know what percentage it is, though.
It is Ben. Ben moved him 8 times, which is 57.14% of the time.
Does that mean, wait, is that 51.7 of his moves?
Of Ben's moves, Ben's appearances on the podcast. Ben moved him 57.14% of appearances.
Somehow I thought he got above the measurement. One time he must have moved him up and down.
No. Ben did move him the first time he appeared, and the second, and the third, and the fourth, and the fifth, and the sixth. Yeah, Ben has never been on and not touched. Oh, once. He did the King and Donald Trump once.
Benjamin.
The lowest, who do you reckon moved him the least?
No, I reckon someone like Naja has not moved him.
Yeah, I think it's a good shout.
No, just moved him once. 2% of her moves.
Oh.
Okay. Before we move on to our next person, which is Zelenskyy, I want to give a quick shout out to our magazine, Too Long. As I'm sure you already know, Too Long is our quarterly magazine where we discuss a whole bunch of different topics, often in more detail and in more thought through interesting language than we can get away with on YouTube. The latest issue is our new Middle East special. In it, we walk through a bunch of Middle Eastern countries and discuss how they're writing the next chapters of their history. That includes Iran, can the Ayatollahs hold on? Qatar, small state, big politics. Some good titles. Oman, breaking the tax taboo. I'm just reading now.
You're doing really good, Jack.
Thank you so much.
Can I say, we're just on this?
Yeah.
I was just going back to the Trump peacemaking thing. I think Iran is actually one of the big open questions there, right? I think that it's very hard to read what's going on in Iran at the moment. And you can see two sort of polar opposite outcomes that are both currently available.
Yeah.
In one case, the various pressures on the Ayatollahs forced them back into a deal with more concessions than in the original JCPOA, which is sort of, I guess, would be the best case outcome from Trump's perspective.
Yeah.
Specifically, on enrichment, which was the sticking point last time around. But conversely, you can very easily see how the Iranians take the lesson of the last year or so, that basically they need a nuke. And it is very hard to read what's going on there at the moment. You get signals from the Iranian Foreign Minister, Abbas Araghchi. What's his name? What's his first name? Abbas Araghchi, I think it is.
I don't know.
Basically saying they really want a deal, they want to restart negotiations, but at the same time, and I think this is as true as of even a couple of days ago, they are continuing to refuse the IAEA access to, especially the damaged sites, right, which is where the pre-existing stockpile of uranium is supposed to be. So, signals in competing directions there, right? On the one hand, it looks like they're going for a deal, but on the other, the same, developing their own nuclear program at the speed that's currently unprecedented, really. Yeah,
and it's not only the Middle East either. The Middle East is the kind of the first 20-25 pages, and the rest of it is made up of articles on all other topics, on UK, EU, global, all of our normal stuff. In fact, a number of people that we're discussing in this episode have sections. There's a bit Rory wrote on why Trump's mandate isn't what it looks like. There's a bit that Ben wrote on how Starmer can maintain power and also how Farage can gain power. And then also coming up, we have one on Macron and his fall from grace. So if you'd like to take a look at all of this, our extra thoughts, our deepest political intuitions all shine through, then take a look at the latest issue of our magazine, Too Long. It's available for order on our website, and if you subscribe, you get 20% off every issue as long as you stay subscribed. Also, if physical paper isn't for you and you just want to read it right now, you can get a digital edition which will be sent immediately to your inbox for even cheaper. So head to the store and take a look. Okay. Up next, our next most moved person. Trump was moved 21 times, by the way. Starmer, 19. Zelenskyy was moved 16 times. Really? Yeah, let's take a look at his year. Zelenskyy started off with kind of pretty bad troubles, dropped the bottom of the board, then bounced up to the top, and now has kind of flatlined a little bit, though still quite a lot of movement. But either way, Zelenskyy has also ended the year in the middle of the board. Rory, what do you make of Zelenskyy's year as a whole, and where do you think he stands at the moment?
Yeah, I think you could probably just map that graph against Trump's sort of swings back and forth towards Putin.
That explains some of the volatility.
Yeah, although more recent difficulties for Zelenskyy have been sort of more domestic and political, with corruption scandals and sort of divisions within government and society, I suppose. Again, ending sort of in that middle point feels quite suitable, I think, because we are still at that point where it's an open question as to what happens.
mean, even as we record, certain level of uncertainty around the discussions happening with European leaders and stuff.
Yeah. I think that so much of his movement has depended on outside factors. It's been things that have happened to him or to Ukraine that makes it, pretty difficult. His own, he can only do so much. But yeah, Zach, in terms of like battlefield stuff, I don't know how much that reflects that, but I'm looking at you, Zach.
I'll fill in. That's all right. Yeah. I think that I do think that if you just read the headlines at the moment, you'd probably sort of intuit that Zelensky's had a pretty rough time.
Yeah.
Right. And the mood music is quite negative. But I do think if you zoom out, remember what we were thinking about in the end of 2024, right? I think Zelensky's actually had a pretty good year, right? So again, end of 2024, a lot of talk about a sort of imminent frontline collapse in Ukraine hasn't materialized at all. Russia has made advances in Kupiansk and Pokrovsk, but actually, in terms of the actual territory gained, it's been pretty minimal. You were also talking, Trump's rhetoric during the campaign was at points, quite furiously anti-Ukraine. And obviously he has sort of returned back those talking points on occasion.
Yeah.
But actually, he hasn't totally withdrawn US support, and he has continued to negotiate with Ukraine when it comes to terms of the peace agreement. And despite all the panic, whatever it was a couple of days ago when he released his 28-point peace plan, which was seen as sort of wildly biased against Ukraine, as always, he's been talked down by Kiev and its European allies, and the sort of latest peace proposal looks a lot more acceptable to Ukraine. I mean, it's the sort of thing that I think will probably get turned down by Russia, especially given the fact that, at least according to current reports, there will be some meaningful security guarantees in there. So I think, again, if you go back to 2024 and remember how people were talking about Ukraine back then, I actually think he's had a pretty good year. I think he's avoided an outright catastrophe so far vis-a-vis Trump. And actually, Russia's battlefield performance has been underwhelming. Again, 2026 looks tough for him. US economic aid especially is basically zero now. And that leaves it all up to the Europeans to muster up some financial support. Annoyingly, we're recording this on, again, you say the 18th. There's an EU summit currently happening. We will know whether or not Europe got it together in time by the time this podcast is out. But I think that he's avoided catastrophe, basically. And I think actually, from his perspective, that's a pretty good outcome.
Landed in the middle and does seem to be a bit of a, as Rory says, a little bit of movements based on broader political trends. He's kind of being blown around in the winds of political fate. 8 wins, 8 losses, very balanced performance. What do we think the year ahead holds for him? Are we optimistic about him being a winner next year, or do we think it will continue to be a bit like this for a while, that he'll be pushed around by Trump, Europe, Putin, whoever else?
I think this is such an equivocal answer. Anyone who actually wanted some insight is going to be left wanting. But I think you can sort of see at least like 3 outcomes. Right, you can see a really, you can see a middling outcome, which is that there's a peace deal agreed. It might force elections on him, for instance. That would be, I think, suboptimal from Zelensky's perspective. It would probably require him to make some concessions, presumably on territory, which apparently remains a sticking point between Ukraine and the US. I think that would be a sort of middle ground outcome, though. But I think, again, whatever that peace deal actually ends up looking like, it is worth noting how far the Overton window has shifted here. It will not be a total capitulation. Ukraine will still have, I think it's probably fair to say, its sovereignty intact, which is very much in question when Russia began its invasion way back in 2022. And Zelensky won't have been forced out. So I think it's not a terrible outcome. You can also see a really bad outcome materializing, right? Which is that if at this EU summit, Europe cannot agree on a means of financing Ukraine for the foreseeable future, that could precipitate a more serious collapse in the front lines and actually more generally in Ukraine's state capacity. And that really would be disastrous. And I think would essentially validate Putin's basic theory that the West is fundamentally too fractured to support Ukraine in the long term. And then you can actually see what I think is a really, really good outcome, right? Which is that if Europe really does get its act together, and can find a way of financing Ukraine, not just for the next 6 months, next year, or whatever, but actually for the foreseeable. Whether that's by sort of seizing Russian assets or joint debt. I think that leaves Ukraine in actually quite a strong negotiating position, especially if Trump believes that Putin collapses these ongoing negotiations, right? Because it does look like Trump has basically come around to the Ukrainian position somewhat, and we're now at a point where actually the peace deal that's currently being talked about, the so-called 20-point peace plan that European leaders and Trump are talking about, I think it's very hard to see Russia accepting that, right?
Yeah.
Not least because it does include meaningful security guarantees for Ukraine, which is something that the Russians have previously ruled out. Then I think you can see a really quite a good outcome materializing where you've got reliable support from Europe. You have a Russian war machine. Then I think it is, this is not just sort of hopium. I think it is showing signs of strain in places, especially on the economy.
Yeah.
And I think that you can also see another really positive development for Ukraine is the fact that there are lots of reasons to think that global oil prices, which is just sort of the fundamental financing vehicle for Russia's war effort, will stay low for 2026, right? I mean, all of the big forecasters, the IEA and the OPEC, are forecasting basically a glut for the next couple of months. And I think you could see that putting real pressure on Russia. If it does look like Europe doesn't have to rely so much on the fickleness of America, I think that leaves Ukraine in a stronger, maybe not a stronger military position, but at least a stronger negotiating position in 2026 than it currently is in.
Okay, I guess you have to watch the podcast next year to find out then. Zach's given you some options, but not necessarily an answer.
Nothing definitive.
Before we move on to our next person, who do we think from the team moved Zelenskyy the most?
I think probably Nadja. Do you think?
I was going to say, I'm tempted by Ben.
Oh, if it's about per appearance.
It is per appearance.
It might be Ben, actually.
I'm going to go Ben.
You're both kind of right. Ben moved him the highest proportion of times, moving him 3 times, but Nadja moved him the most times. Nadja moved him 5 times. So both kind of right, but on our proportional model based on the number of times people appeared, Ben is Zelenskyy's biggest mover. Next, let's take a look at Emmanuel Macron and his year. It's a real cliff there.
Heartbreaking.
Macron started we bumped him down at the beginning, but then kind of slowly edged his way to the top, really kind of enjoyed a lot of victory at the top. 4 ultimate wins for Macron, only 7 wins and 4 of them ultimates, which is quite the achievement. But then since then, really falling off a cliff fast. 2 big ultimate losses there, pulling him down. He has bounced back to the regularly negative section rather than the very negative one, but yeah, the back half of the year looking pretty bad for Macron. Zach, you've already expressed your disappointment. What do you make of this?
I just don't remember. Do you remember why we moved him up so much?
No, because it's not
at
like
the
he
start?
started. He's been unpopular for years. I mean, we've said this with every leader so far, but is it the international stuff?
Yeah, it could be.
But what international stuff was?
I think maybe I'm points giving him credit for standing up to Trump. And being the
Mr.
poster
Strategic
guard for
Autonomy.
Mr. Strategic Autonomy. It's a great rap name. But yeah, I mean, I think I don't want to spend too much time on this because it hurts me. But I think he's had a pretty terrible year. Yeah, unfortunately. He is incredibly unpopular at the moment, and he's been sort of rendered slightly impotent. And I think he's always been seen as arrogant, and he looks really quite arrogant at the moment. Sort of holed up in the Elysee, refusing to make concessions and reappointing prime ministers. And I do think. Again, I think we talked about this on the podcast before, but we're not taking sufficiently seriously, I don't think, in the Anglophone world at least, the prospect of a Bardella presidency in 2027.
Yeah.
Because all the polls suggest that he's now beating everyone else, including Edouard Philippe, who was ahead of him for a while. And I think that, we don't really know what Europe looks like in that case, right? In one of the 2 big players in the EU, being led by someone who at least has a history of Euroscepticism, I think that's going to be interesting.
Yeah. Rory?
Yeah, it's hard to see. I mean, his current trajectory is very good.
That's true.
Based on that very last
1
movement.
week.
But it is hard to see that any sort of positive trajectory for him, because he has had certain wins this year, but those wins from I can remember are things like, his prime minister survived a confidence vote at that point, but then, later on down the line, lost one and, budgets just about passing or not passing. Like the wins he's had have been small and momentary. And I think it will continue to be like that if there are any wins. I think his legacy, I mean, it's still a year and a half until the next election. So maybe, talking about his legacy might seem premature, but like he's already, his pension reform that puts so much political sort of capital into to get through against much opposition has already been sort of pulled back because that's basically the only concession his prime minister could make to get enough support in parliament. And, it's just, there's just so many sort of bad signs for him that I think he's, being at the bottom of the board
Seems
is the only
right.
place he can be.
I just think it's quite depressing to think about. I mean, this is not necessarily meant as a diss on the other leaders, but to think that Europe is going from a sort of, at least at one point, a Macron-Merkel duo. I mean, Scholz was pretty rubbish, wasn't he? But Macron-Merkel at one point to a Bardella-Merz duo. And I think, whatever you think about Merz, I don't think he really shows much interest in big foreign policy stuff, right? I think that, and he hasn't really made much of a splash on that. I do think that is a less geopolitically interested Europe, at least, right? And probably less geopolitically effective Europe.
Yeah.
I also think if Bardella does win, you're still going to have real like political gridlock in France because the National Assembly isn't going to be, probably not going to be a National Rally majority. So he's going to still have to work within the confines of that, and you're going to have the people in the National Assembly that are opposed to him are going to be even more sort of vehemently opposed to him than they have been to Macron. Yeah. So I don't think 2027, it'll be a massive political change, but I don't think it will be the start of stability. Sure. So yeah.
I also, last thing I'll say, I think that if you go back all the way to, when did he first win? What, 2017? Yeah. I think there's this whiff of inevitability to it all, right? In that, like, he was supposed to be the man that was sort of supposed to rescue French politics by coming through the middle and creating this centrist coalition. But I think the idea that a centrist coalition in those terms was going to hold on to a functioning majority, it was always unlikely, right? Yeah. You made it a three-party system. He's not saved French politics by turning it from a two to a three-party system. And I think that was always going to lend itself to a bit of dysfunction later down the line. I think obviously it's very easy to say this sort of stuff in hindsight, right? And pontificate and all that. But I think there is something to that. I think that remember the commentary at the time being like, the savior of France and Europe. And actually, I think in a way, you look back on that and think that it was a very temporary respite, and he was just a symptom and a sort of an addition to the instability that has beset not just French but European politics for a long time.
We have another European to move on to in a second, but before we do, who do you think has moved Macron the most this year?
I think it'll be me.
Yeah, I could be. I think it could be, but then...
Oh, you did a lot of budget stuff.
Yeah, but then I'm thinking all those moves up at the start. That's probably you, right?
I was very...
That's just fanboying.
Some of that's around Liberation Day, right? Sort of,
Yeah, I think I lean towards Zach on that one.
It is not. Proportionate to appearances, it's Nadja who moved him up 8.3% of the time. But that is in reality 4 movements, which is exactly the same as you, Rory.
Oh.
Zach, you moved him 3 times.
I only moved Macron 3 times.
You did.
I honestly think that data's wrong.
It's not.
Stop the count.
Would you be surprised to hear Ben didn't touch him?
No, that doesn't sound right.
But I think you do like to bring up Macron in conversations that aren't specifically about him, so maybe that's why our memories have been
off camera too, constantly.
Poor Narja, every time she moves Macron, I wax lyrical.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to our next person. As I already said, another European, maybe even the European, Ursula von der Leyen, who actually has a relatively similar trajectory to Macron. Starts the year relatively well, bouncing around the middle, then kind of peaks in the middle of the year, and then really has dropped off again, almost exactly the same trajectory. What do we make of Ursula von der Leyen's year? I don't mind who wants to go first, but...
I'm trying to think what that caused that massive sort of drop off a cliff there.
There was some Europe, I think probably partly the EU-US trade deal. Which I remember was so I think let's do a bit of revisionism here, because I think that was unfair at the time. In retrospect, I changed my mind on that. I think that EU-US trade deal got a lot of flack. Von der Leyen specifically got a lot of flack, but actually I think she did pretty well there. She made some pledges that she knew she couldn't keep. Yeah.
That's fine.
Are just not going to be honoured. And
so does everyone else making deals with Trump.
Exactly. And she seems to have somehow got away with it in a way that apparently Keir Starmer hasn't, right? Because he made some pledges that he couldn't keep. And now he's got Trump breathing down his neck, telling him to let in the chlorinated chicken.
Yeah.
Von der Leyen said, I'll buy $250 billion worth of American LNG, and that's just never going to happen.
Yeah.
And she's apparently gotten away with it. So, I think actually she played a very good long game there. There were some EU scandals as well. And she lost a couple of votes in the parliament.
Yeah, she has.
Yes, that didn't. I remember that being a big conversation.
Her commission has faced a number of scandals, that's right. But also on the leaderboard, she has ended up becoming the face of Europe. So when Europe's done badly, she has sort of fallen on the board, which may be a bit unfair, but also, if anyone's going to be the face of Europe, probably going to be the European Commission president.
That does feel true, though, that Europe's they've been the loser this year, or a loser this year.
I think it's been a lot of sort of disappointment. I think disappointment in how the continent has responded to things, and things I mainly mean Trump, I suppose. But again, that is the difficulty of having a political setup that includes, a parliament, an elected parliament, all of the heads of states of the different members, and then an executive that in theory has decent amount of power, but also can't really do anything without the sort of support of all of those elected heads of state or heads of government. I know with von der Leyen, no, maybe it wasn't this year. I guess it was last year. We were talking about or sort of the media talking about her as Queen of Europe and her consolidation of power. And I feel like in the last year, that has become less of a thing. And actually, if you look at what she's done, it's been more. She's sort of just been working more with the tools at her disposal, trying to find majorities in the parliament. That kind of thing. And I think that sort of reflects that her as an individual doesn't have a huge amount of power and is more dependent on the other parts of the European Union. But yeah.
I think that's a really good point. I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, I think whereas a couple of years ago she felt like a bit more of a leader. I think now she feels a lot like a follower. She's always reacting to swings in both European public opinion, but also what European leaders want. Right, and that leads to the watering down of the Green New Deal, U-turn on combustion engines, for instance. Right, I think it's hard to see that as anything but reactive. I would still say, though, I think I completely agree with Roy's analysis about it being disappointing for Europe, and I completely agree with his sort of the reasons he gave, which is essentially that the EU is just a bit too veto heavy. It's a bit too fragmented at the moment to make quick and sort of. The EU itself can't take important decisions, obviously, without unanimity or at least consensus. And I think that's just really cut against it. But I think you can see a world where in the next couple of years, von der Leyen becomes more and more powerful if the lesson of the past year is that Europe does need to sort of centralize power, at least in certain respects, give the Commission a bit more agency to make sure that it can react with sufficient agility to all the sort of geopolitical shifts. And so I think you could imagine, or at least envision, a world where von der Leyen becomes more powerful as a result of the chaos of this year in the coming years, especially if there's a big joint debt issuance vis-a-vis Ukraine.
As we discussed in the latest episode of the Daily Briefing.
One of my favourite talking points.
Not Daily Briefing?
For a second now, I thought you were going to tell me. It's going to have to kill it again.
We're still doing it behind your back. We're not releasing it.
It's just for our own satisfaction.
Okay, before we move on from Ursula von der Leyen, who is her biggest fan? Who moved her most proportionately?
Can I go Georgie?
Yeah, I think that's probably a good shout.
It is Georgina. However, Zach did move her more total times. Georgina moved her on 11% of her appearances, but only 4 times, whereas Zach moved her 5 times. Oh. Before we move on to our final 2, which is Vladimir Putin and Benjamin Netanyahu, if you want to have your say, if you disagree with these takes, then you can cast your vote now in our most influential person vote. It's linked in the description. And when you head over there, you can vote for the 10 people that you think are most influential in the world. And that's not just world leaders. It's also cultural figures. It's business leaders. It's religious figures. It's all kinds of people. And by casting your vote, you're helping us form our list of the top 25 most influential people of 2026. This is something we did last year. Last year, Donald Trump came out on top, but with your votes, that could maybe change. So cast your vote now, and we will be discussing the results of that both in the next issue of Too Long, which comes out in March, but also in videos at the beginning of next year as well. So if you want to have your say, if you want to be part of the TLDR vote, then click the link in the description and you can cast your vote now. Next up, though, let's discuss Vladimir Putin, who is kind of the inverse of a number of the ones we've been speaking about. Started with a bit of a shaky year, dropped down to the negative section, and then pretty rapidly ended up shifting upwards and has spent quite a lot of the back end of the year in the winning section. One interesting to note is he moved up 7 times, moved down 4, but he was the ultimate winner on every single occasion he was nominated. So every single episode we discussed Putin, at the end of the episode, we decided that he was the biggest winner of that week, which is kind of crazy. No one else even comes close to that. That being said, Putin, was he a winner this year?
Probably.
Yeah.
But I don't want to overdo it. I think people can overdo it. Yeah. Not at least Putin himself is always sort of, he's got quite smug vibes.
Yeah.
You know, no disrespect.
Him and Macron.
Yeah. That's our balance on the show right there. Fine. I think it's 2 main wins. One is really obvious, and it's Trump.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think that the Trump's election has been massive. Yeah. Massive win for Putin. Maybe he hasn't got everything he would have hoped for out of him. I do also think it's worth noting that I think Putin has completely missed a golden opportunity here when it comes to Trump, in that at the Alaska summit, you know, there's a lot of reporting from the FT basically that Trump went in there and wanted to make a deal on really favorable terms to Russia, and Putin just gave a history lecture and got Trump so grumpy that the whole meeting collapsed. But I think, you know, had he basically played that a bit, just basically a more normal dude, I reckon he could have got a great deal out of Trump there. So I think that actually Putin has played a really great hand quite badly there. I think Trump shouldn't have been toing and froing between Ukraine and Russia, right? If Putin had just avoided the history lecture and maybe made some smaller concessions here and there instead of sort of very rigidly sticking to his maximalist objectives, I think he could have got a great deal that Trump would have forced on Ukraine. And I think the final deal will not be as good as the one he could have got. Yeah. The other big win, though, and I think this isn't really reported on as much as China, I think, because I think that China's clear unwillingness to use its leverage with Russia to force it into a peace deal in Ukraine, despite some of the sort of rhetoric that you see from the CCP about the importance of territorial integrity and maintaining global peace and all that sort of thing, I think is a massive win for Putin. I think that there was a sort of latent hope in Europe not too long ago that actually maybe they would be able to tempt Beijing into exerting some pressure on Putin to bring the war to a close, and that just hasn't happened. And again, it's hard to, you have to read, you know, reading the sort of CCP tea leaves is a slightly futile exercise, but there have been the occasional reports suggesting that actually the Beijing are more pro-Russia, I think, than lots of people appreciate. There was a report in Politico not too long ago that during a meeting between basically Chinese policymakers and MEPs, the MEPs were absolutely shocked by how frequently Chinese policymakers would basically repeat Russian talking points, especially about NATO. And I think it's a boring thing, but I think people don't appreciate how much there was during the bombing of Serbia, the Chinese embassy was hit back in the 90s, and that has sort of etched into the psyche of Chinese policymakers, and they still harbour a sort of skepticism towards NATO, at least, you know, according to well-sourced reporting. And so, yeah, I think that's a sort of quiet win for him, I think the fact that China has remained a very staunch ally.
Rory?
Yeah, I think I agree. Although I feel like he snuck up to the top of the board, and he should have. I don't think that position reflects where I think he should be. But I guess since reaching the top of the board, there haven't been those moments where it's like, oh, we've got to bring him down for this or that. Whereas, like, you know, the early fluctuations were Trump summit, Trump turns against him, Trump comes back, that type of thing. Yeah,
he certainly had much less movement in the second half of the year. He snuck his way to the top and chilled out there.
Yeah, which is probably reflects the fact that Ukraine was such a big topic earlier on in the year than it is now. I know it's sort of getting back.
Which is to some extent a win for him too.
Yeah.
Before we move on from Putin then, who is Putin's biggest fan?
I'm not.
It's a different question,
I don't
maybe.
think she's his biggest fan, but I think Nadja has moved him
I'd be tempted by that. I could see
Oh, but then we
Georgie
already
as
had-
well. Let's go, Naja.
Yeah.
Naja is the right
Yes.
answer. Naja moved him 10% of the time, 5 movements. Georgina only moved him once. You also moved him 5 times, though, Zach. Only 6% of your movements, but you also moved him 5 times.
Felt oddly like an attack there, but
No,
it's a fair point. Yeah.
And finally, our last world leader we want to discuss today, before we move on to the fun ending, is Benjamin Netanyahu, who we moved 9 times total on the board throughout the year. And his movement looks like this, ending the year in the lightly negative section, but having filled basically every spot on the board at some point. He won 4 times, lost 5 times, and had a good number of ultimate wins and losses. 5 ultimate losses. Every time he lost, he ultimately lost as well, which is kind of crazy. Do we think this is reflective of where he is right now? Lightly negative?
It's a tricky one, really, because he's such a... I don't know if there's any other world leader where so many things on the international stage happen to him that are sort of headline bad things, demonstrating international isolation and people turning against him, all that kind of stuff. But it just doesn't seem to matter to him, and he doesn't. And I don't
think it matters domestically.
Yeah, and he uses it to his advantage. So there are things that we've moved him down for. Lots of countries recognizing Palestine or becoming increasingly critical of Israel. It is bad for Israel and him, but
But I think that's a distinction. I think it's bad for Israel, and I don't think it's bad for him.
I mean, I think maybe
he's done
long term, but like the fact that his party is now back in the lead in the polls with an election next year is such a huge turnaround from where things were like post October 7th, that like if we were basing it, basing it on change in the last couple of years, he would have to be way up at the top. And you can say like he was sort of strong-armed into a Gaza ceasefire, but actually the situation that Israel now maintains in Gaza is that it effectively has like freedom to act and bomb where it wants, when it wants in Gaza. It still controls quite a big proportion of the strip. And it's got a similar thing in Lebanon, where it will just strike sort of at will, even though there is a ceasefire in place. Like those sort of things that the Netanyahu government were pressured into, the actual current status quo is actually pretty good from his point of view. But that the sort of weird counterpoint to that is that he is politically, and sort of always has been since he returned to power, like really vulnerable, in the sense his majority is very narrow, and it's a coalition that has parties in it that are constantly sort of threatening to leave and are pushing him around on various issues. But he manages to navigate that and sort of come out on top each time. And we've made videos about the various things that could have brought down his coalition, whether it's like the sort of orthodox military service thing, or his corruption trial, which is still ongoing but always being sort of delayed because of various security things. Like he just comes out sort of on top politically, and I think his position where he is right now on the board probably doesn't reflect that.
Zach?
Completely agree. I think from his perspective, again, this is the whole point of this podcast, right? It's not our opinions from that politician's perspective. I think it's hard to say anything apart from an incredible year. Just an absolutely amazing year for Benjamin Netanyahu. I mean, go back to 2024 or even late 2023, everyone, the one certainty in Israeli politics was supposed to be that Benjamin Netanyahu could not hang on. And he's still going. And Roy's right. The polls suggest that his Likud party I think they would be the biggest party at the moment.
Yeah.
And he's ahead of the polls in preferred PM for Naftali Bennett. Who was the one he saw off, the former IDF general? Benny Gantz saw him off easy.
Yeah.
I think, just, obviously, I don't like the politics, but you have to respect an incredible political operator.
Yeah.
It's stunningly good at clinging onto power. I think I don't even know how he's done it. Yeah. And I'm always right. The facts that he's created on the ground in Gaza, Lebanon, Syria as well. Essentially, Israel's occupying territory in all those places. And getting away with it's too strong, but
it just doesn't really matter.
Exactly.
Doesn't have to get away with it.
I think in the long term, as I say, I basically think this year has been great for Netanyahu and bad for Israel.
Yeah.
I think that is diplomatically isolated in lots of ways. There are places where maybe that's recoverable. I think it's worth noting that there was a big gas deal signed with Egypt recently and a secret meeting with the Qataris, which I think both suggest that there are at least some players in the region who are willing to mend ties. But I still think that most Gulf monarchies just can't. For now. I think relations with Europe are broken.
Yeah.
And I think, perhaps most importantly, relations with the US now just do look quite tenuous. This current administration might be quite pro-Israel in lots of ways, but there's a big contingent of MAGA that really isn't, obviously. And I think most Democrats, especially younger Democrats, who obviously will be playing more and more important electoral role in the future, are really not very pro-Israel anymore.
No.
And that shift in public opinion has been very, very dramatic.
Yeah.
But I think great for Netanyahu, not good for Israel.
Yeah, I can see that. Maybe it should be moved a bit higher on the board next year then. Who do we think moved him the most proportionately last year?
I think it could be me.
Yeah.
I know I moved him a lot, but I don't know about proportionally, but I think it might be me. Yeah.
Well, this is where the proportionate thing breaks, because the answer is Ben. But Ben only moved him once. However, everyone else basically it was pretty even. Rory, Nadja, and Zach all moved him twice. Ben moved him once. Georgina moved him once. The audience moved him once. So
wow,
a bit of a spread. So I guess the answer is Zach, Rory, and Nadja, really. But if you're looking at the numbers, Ben proportionately moved him most. So that is where the leaderboard stands right now. If we want to take a look at the board at the end of the year, all of those people obviously bounced around, a lot of fluctuation throughout the year, but this is kind of how things sit currently. And as I say, we will be back in the new year again to move more people around. Before we finish, though, we normally end with the ultimate winner and ultimate loser, and we get our whiteboards out. Today we're ending with something similar but different, with a fun little game at the end. Okay, so we've obviously throughout the episode discussed which individual in the team moved each of these people the most. But I've also run the numbers for each of you to work out which people only you moved and also moved a lot. So, for instance, the first question we're going to pose is there's a politician who only Zach moved throughout the year, but Zach moved him 7 times. Have a guess as to who you think that person is. The board is obviously there for reference. If you want to remember who's on the board.
Just answering, or are we discussing it?
I'd say just write it down and then you can justify.
I'm going to go for 2. Hedge my bets.
That's absolutely cheating.
So I'm going to go for it. I think I know who it is.
How many times is it?
7 times, and only Zach ever moved them. Zach says Milei.
I've also gone Milei.
Milei was moved a lot by Zach.
Yeah.
Zach moved Milei 6 times, but Nadja also moved him once. The correct answer is Xi Jinping.
Yeah, I thought it might be.
Only Zach moved
He must
Xi
have got quite a lot
last
of double
year.
wins because he was at +7 at some point.
Yeah.
He was way up at the top.
Next one, Rory. Only you moved this politician, and you moved them 3 times. Who is it?
It's going to be.
There's some I know that I've moved. Oh, actually, yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. I'm just going to write that.
Stop cheating, Zach.
Sorry.
Cheating by telling
Stop looking.
No, I was just looking for the spelling. I was going to call him Mr. South Korea on a global channel. Main channel's not allowed. You can't do
Who
that.
do you think it is?
It's Lee Jae-mun. His name I knew, obviously, straight off the bat.
Rory, you agree?
Yeah, only because Zach said it out loud and I thought, that's a good answer. Yeah, but I do think it probably is Lee.
It's a good answer, but it's the wrong answer. Modi. You've Modi 3 times. No one else touched Modi.
You got peer pressured. You're weak.
One more for you, Rory, because you're good at the unique ones.
Yeah.
There's someone else who you moved 4 times. The audience moved once, but no one in the team ever touched them. It is, I can tell you, not Modi, obviously, and it's also not Lee Jae-mun.
Okay. Audience moved how many times? Once. And
you moved 4 times. The audience moved once.
I might go. Oh no, sorry, I shouldn't say it out loud.
You're going to spoil the fun of the really fun game.
Okay, who do you reckon?
I've gone for Bong Bong Marcos Jr.
Okay, yeah,
Is it that?
President?
Yeah, go.
Can I? Is it?
It is not Bong Bong Marcos.
Cyril Ramaphosa.
It is not Cyril
What?
either.
Come
it's
off it.
Lula.
Oh,
Good
yeah.
one.
Rory is the only person to have moved. The audience did move him once though, but it's only 2 movements total, so not that many.
Yeah, that's why you should watch the nichest moves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, just we got to say Brazil isn't niche, otherwise they're
Oh,
gonna-
yes.
That's very incredible. That was actually based off the other suggestions. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole again.
Okay.
Brazil's a very big country.
I'm going to ask
Cut
you.
that, actually. Let's cut that.
Okay, there's 3 answers to this one. You're allowed 3 guesses if you want, up to 3 guesses. Nadja, she is the only mover of 3 major people. 1, she moved 4 times, and 2, she moved twice. Up to 3 guesses. You don't have to do 3 guesses if you don't want, but there's 3 points available, so you might as well give it a go.
Okay, I'm going to go for 4 people.
Great.
I'm going for 4.
No, choose 3.
Well, I'm going to go for 3, but I tell you, if the one that I rubbed off.
Okay,
is
don't rub it
not
off.
on,
Just put a line through it so we can see.
I'm going to be quite grumpy.
Okay, who have you gone for?
Shinebaum,
Yeah.
Aliev,
Yeah.
Fitzo,
Yeah, and who's
Sambu, Maya Sambu.
Okay.
Oh, mine are quite different. I've gone for Prabowo Subianto,
Yeah.
spelling unsure, Indonesian president, Maya Sandu, and Eddie Rama.
Okay, you have most of the answers between you. She moved Rama twice.
Yeah.
She moved Fico twice. Neither of you got the 4 though. Vucic.
I didn't even. Where is
4
Vucic?
times.
He's off the board.
No,
No, he's
he's-
at the bottom.
Oh,
He is
yeah,
at the
I-
bottom.
he's
Yeah.
sneaking around.
He was
down
hidden
there.
by the thing.
Okay, we're nearly done.
How did we not get?
No,
Vucic?
no.
Yeah, it's
That's
crazy.
embarrassing.
Okay,
The
Georgina.
Balkan expert.
You get 2 guesses this one. Georgina has 2 unique choices. 1 she moved 4 times. 1 she moved 3 times. It's kind of fair that you 2 are playing this game actually, because you've been on more episodes than anyone else.
you'd really struggle.
If this was Ben, it would be brutal.
I'm going to go this and this.
You presumably watches all the
All right.
episodes, though.
Presumably,
So,
yeah. Okay, Rory, who have you gone for?
I've gone for Jonas Stora and Alexander Stubb,
Okay.
based on the fact that she loves to pronounce those names.
She does, you're
So
right.
I feel like those are strong answers.
Sturda's a great bet, but I've gone for Maduro and
Oh,
Tusk.
Maduro is good.
Bang on, Maduro and Tusk.
Really?
Crazy.
Wow, that's good.
Uh,
How have none of us touched?
I've always noted because
Where is
she always picks Maduro at the when he's being invaded, no mention. But then it'll be something like I don't know, oil prices drop $1. Maduro gets hit.
where is Donald Tusk on there? I can't
The
see.
bottom. He's
Tusk
at the
is at the
very
bottom.
bottom.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's that. He's sort of been forgotten about, I think, down there.
okay.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, Ben doesn't have any unique choices, but we're going to do one more, which is someone that Zach moved once, Rory moved once, but the audience moved 5 times.
Oh my god.
What?
Who are the audience obsessed with?
Albanese?
Oh, that's not a bad shout, actually. We just conspired.
Yeah.
You have conspired.
But what if it's wrong?
Completely ruined the game,
What
but
if
no
it's
one's
wrong?
watching at this point. So.
So there are only 5 that the audience have moved more than once. Twice we've moved Ursula von der Leyen, Lee Jae-myung, and Ulf Kristersson because of the audience.
Oh,
3 times we've moved Cyril Ramaphosa. 5 times we've moved Anthony Albanese.
Yes.
The audience are obsessed
They
with
really
Albo.
are.
In
Yeah.
fact, we were talking about this morning before you 2 arrived when the latest episode went up, and the very first comment on the video was Albanese. From
can't
what
get
looked
enough
like a
of him.
bot account. So maybe we should stop moving
It's the
Albo.
Australian bot.
Because I
Australian
wonder if
bot
there's an
farm. Yes.
anti-Albo bot farm out there.
amazing.
Anyway, that is our review of people moving last year. I hope you got the right answers. I'm hoping there's a tally on screen of the
Yeah.
points that these 2 got, but we didn't keep track, so who knows. Anyway, join us again next year for more movement, where every week we discuss the winners and losers in politics over on the TLDR podcast YouTube channel. There's a link in the description. You've also got a whole bunch of episodes to catch up on if you
Yeah.
want to catch up on old news.
Oh, lucky you.
And you can also
This is like our race
subscribe.
back to 1 million subscribers.
Or you can subscribe to the podcast in your favorite podcast app by just searching for the World Leader Leaderboard, and we'll be there. So join us again in the new year. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for sticking around for this long. We'll see you in 2026.
Shoot,
Happy New Year.
Yeah. Especially to Brazil.